Welcome, everyone, to the Credible Nerds podcast. My name is Justin, and I have a special guest with me here today. We'll be talking something different. This is our first podcast episode in a new series that we're going to be doing. We'll be addressing the Stephen King novels and short stories and movies and everything Stephen King. So we brought in a Stephen King expert specifically for this podcast. You've heard him in our podcast before. I was looking back at the records, and back in April 2017, I think it was, when you were a guest initially, one of our first guests. So that was awesome. But we're bringing back Jordan,
Hello, welcome.
and he's a big time Stephen King fan. How long you been reading Stephen King, would you say, Jordan?
I started in, I want to say ninth grade, so that would have put me at 15, so we're 23 years now.
Nice.
If I'm doing math right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was ninth grade, so I think is when I started.
Yeah.
Maybe eighth, somewhere in middle school.
Yeah. I think I read my first Stephen King novel then, around that age too, The Stand, but that was it. I didn't keep reading that much after that. A couple here and there. That's all.
I probably could get the year right because The Green Mile was out when I started. That wasn't my first Stephen King book, but after I read the first couple, then The Green Mile came out. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So were you hooked that first book, or like what started you?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up reading Goosebumps. That was my,
Yeah.
my jam. I'd go to the book fair every year and get the new couple Goosebump books that had come out, and just, got to the point where I was like talking to my mom, and I'm like, I want something scarier. So we tried a couple, I did some Peter Straub and just some stuff, and then she's like, "Oh, I read The Shining in college, and it scared me pretty good." So that was my first Stephen King book was The Shining.
Okay.
Just ate that up. Then I did Cycle of the Werewolf, which is a really lesser known Stephen King story, but it was more my age level. It's pretty short and illustrated, and then I started The Green Mile. And in talking to my mom about The Green Mile, she then banned me from reading Stephen King. So I think I stopped right after that until kind of I got into college, and then I just was like, I'm gonna pick this up again, and I started from Carrie and just full on read through. So
Nice.
that's how I like doing things. I'm very
Methodical.
particular in my order. I struggle doing things out of order. So
I think they call that OCD. Is that what it is?
I have a lot of those tendencies, especially just movies, books, everything. It's got to be how they came out. So I'm very, OCD in that way. So,
Yeah. Cool.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have our passions. I'd rather call it a passion than an OCD diagnosis, but yeah, we all have our passions. I have mine, and that's we've known each other for 10 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, a little bit longer.
And that was one of the first things we talked about, was just Stephen King and all the books and how much you've read. And we kind of spent some time at lunch break talking about that. You were obviously a bigger fan than I was, so it was fun to talk to you about those things, though. We started this first episode. We're going to be talking about Firestarter, and we both read the book. You've read it how many times?
So I think, apart from really The Shining, I've read that a couple times, and that one I can just kind of pick up, but I'm really going through my just second read through. I mean, yes, it took me like 7 or 8 years to read everything the first time, and now I started. So this is a good medium for me to then start it back up again, because I really was like, I want to start going through and reading in order again. So I started with Carrie last year, and then it worked out really good because Firestarter was next on my list, right? As the new movie came out, so it was a perfect one to watch. So
yeah, this was my first time reading it. I liked it. It was good. It's a quick read. Probably took me 5, 6, 7 hours maybe total, and I don't know, maybe not that long, but It was good. When was this book written? Do you remember?
So I've
Like
got it.
80s?
Yeah, 1980.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, before I was born.
Yeah. So in the timeline so we are doing on our website, there's a new Stephen King section on crediblenerds.com. Just go to crediblenerds.com. There's a series review tab on the main menu. It's a drop down, click on that, and there's a Stephen King option. So go there. And we're going to try to post written reviews as well as, links to this podcast and other things. So go check that out. But we have a chronological read through list that you created.
Yeah.
And I think this is like book 9 on the list. So kind of what's your thoughts or your creation thought process on creating that timeline? It starts with Carrie, right?
Yep. We got Carrie. We talking just kind of where this falls in that.
Well, how did you like create the timeline? Is that
So I actually own in my, I guess, expertise we'll call it, instead of my nerdiness maybe of Stephen King. I actually just own a straight up bibliography. It was like $60 and it's just straight. This book was written. Here's all the versions of it. Here's when they came out, and it just lists them all in order. It ends maybe it's a couple years old, 5 or 6 years old, so it doesn't have the newer stuff. But I just went through that list one by one, and I filtered the stuff that was like that's impossible to find. Some things you can't. He canceled some stuff and things like that. But just went through the main, just his novels, and that's how I compiled it. So.
Okay. Is it chronological in publication order or in universe? Is there an in universe order?
No, there's not a in universe, but my history, and that's kind of one of the reasons I like reading them in order, especially Stephen King, because everything does kind of, happen in a big universe. I actually have, I have a Stephen King universe book.
Okay.
And so it kind of goes and says, hey, these people are in this book. They later show up in this book. So, he does a pretty good job. This isn't a prequel to anything that has already happened. It falls kind of right in line. But, Firestarter is also kind of unique in that it really doesn't have anything to do with anything else. No characters are reoccurring, no locations. It's kind of a one-off. So
okay, cool. So that list on our website is in publication order.
Publication order.
Yeah, cool.
Not a hey, this is how you should read order. I guess we could break some stuff down. You have some series, Dark Tower series, and then recently he's really focused on that's kind of like the Bill Hodges trilogy, and then you have the Gwendy trilogy. So he's got some of those that are, actual series, but for the most part, they're standalone, but they do, you get some little Easter eggs and nods here and there. So
okay, cool. So you mentioned earlier that the Firestarter movie came out recently, and that prompted you to pick this book to start with this one. I did watch the new movie that came out with Zac Efron, and we watched it. We didn't go to the theaters. We watched it in our basement on Peacock, and that was a good move. It was $5 a month. No, we paid the $10 ad-free version, but I thought it started out really well with the film, the background with the testing at the college, and there's kind of like this VCR type footage of them being interviewed during that experimentation that they participated in. And so I thought it started out good, and I was like, oh, this is going to be really good. It's bringing in the book. It's not doing these crazy flashback scenes and things. And then it got going and going. And to be honest, probably 20 minutes in, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know how this is going to go. And then about an hour in, the people who I was watching it with, my wife and some friends, they were just bored. And I kind of was bored too. I was disappointed. We got to the scene at the farm with the sniper guy was Well, we are going to talk spoilers, just so you know. I would imagine that if you're here for this, you have read the book at least or seen the movie. So we will be talking spoilers and things out of order, but we'll try and cover everything. So yeah, the Indian was killing the police officers, and I don't know. I just couldn't. I turned it off, meaning to watch it later, and then I never did. Never did follow up. So, but you've seen the original. When was that first movie with Drew Barrymore? When did that come out?
Let me
It's
see.
80s, right?
Yeah, because Drew Barrymore is actually she plays Charlie McGee in the original film.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like here they're saying 1984.
Okay.
Right at Halloween time was the original one. So
Yeah, and I remember seeing that as a kid. Seeing like, ooh, there's fire, and she can start fires with her mind. So I knew a little bit. I don't know when I started seeing that, maybe late 80s on video or something. So I was aware of it, but I don't remember ever watching it. Maybe I did at some point, but uh, so I never saw it that I remember. How would you compare? You were telling me earlier there's that movie, then there's like a follow-up sequel.
there's a made for TV sequel that now we get Charlie, and Stephen King has always said he wants to, he's funny. He says, hey, a sequel would be good, and yet that idea hasn't come up in his head, so
Yeah.
he let somebody else do it. And you know, I will say it was more interesting than the remake.
Oh,
It was
the
better
2022
than that.
version.
Yeah, because Stephen King is also very notorious for not having a lot of control in his movies. He doesn't like it. He's one that he's like, I wrote the book, and I'm going to give you the rights to make the movie, and you do it, and I'm excited to see what you want to do with it. And so it kind of is a interesting subject with the fans, because to be frank, a lot of the movies that are Stephen King adaptations miss the mark, just because I think we have that expectation of what oh, I want to see this, and I want to see this play out, and I'm excited to see this scene happen. And a lot of times they're completely different. And so I try to really go in with that mindset of, hey, this is just, it's kind of Firestarter. Let's see how it will play out and stuff like that. But I struggled with this new movie just in itself. I didn't enjoy the movie even as just as a movie. Kind of like you said, I was bored during it. Firestarter, we can't really call it a true horror movie. It's not that scary. But I didn't have the thrills and anything like that. So I thought it missed a lot of the good storytelling. Just, I didn't care for any of the characters, things like that. And so the original movie, really followed the book to a T.
Wow.
Probably one of the more faithful adaptions I've ever seen. Now, it had to leave a lot out. It's a, again, short movie, but that one did follow pretty much what happened. So I did it.
Yeah, it really bothered me that it started out strong and then didn't. It just kind of went on its own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the initial movie, the original movie, did follow it pretty well. How was the overall story? Did it feel like they left a bunch out, or was it pretty strong?
Well, yeah, I mean, and just to talk a lot about with Firestarter, the real kind of, in my opinion, the real horror of Firestarter, the thing I like the most is you have John Rainbird, who's kind of this main villain behind the scenes, and just his, maybe even with today's society, a little more hit to home. That's kind of the interesting thing reading these books now. But his grooming of this little girl and he kind of creepily fell in love with her.
Yeah.
But he's just grooming her to do what he wants her to do and get her to do these things and kind of tricking her. And all of that is kind of lost when you have just a, hour and a half movie.
Yeah.
This is something I think could be great as like a drama TV series where you could really look at these personal relationships, because that's, for me, is one of the better parts of the storytelling, is just how he's pretty evil, and you don't get a sense in that from any of the film adaptations. There's just not enough time. And in the new one, you really even don't have a clue who the heck he is. He just kind of shows up and starts shooting people, and you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
So that, that was rough, because that's a lot of the, and also for Stephen King stuff, he's a big personal storyteller. And so his movies do kind of fall flat in that, because they got to get the story going, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So,
yeah, you brought up a good point earlier in that it's not really a horror story. There's some scary stuff and some creepy stuff with Rainbird, like you mentioned. But it was less horror than I was expecting from a Stephen King novel.
Mm-hmm.
I did enjoy it. As far as the story elements, the secret agency that's testing people and now has to track them down and get rid of them or try to capture them and all that stuff. So the drama of the story was really good, and the character development and just the character interactions. There wasn't a lot of character development outside of Charlie and what's her dad's name again? Andrew?
Andy McKee.
Yeah. Outside of those two, because we spent a lot of time with them, but like the background characters with Rainbird and the professor and the main CIA guy, John, they're not all. There's some story there, and we do get a peek into their lives, but it's not as intense as the other ones. But yet I still feel like they were well-rounded characters, and I could sense their motivations, sympathize with them a little bit, and so very well-written characters despite their lack of overall screen time.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things, and that's actually kind of the horror of it, and you missed it out on both movies, but Andy has the ability to push people and get them to do things. And, the way they portray it in both movies is just kind of silly. He's got to do something physical to show you that he's pushing people, and in the original movie, he actually like grabs his head and he does this little thing, and it's just ridiculous. But then what happens is, he pushes somebody, and then their brain just kind of starts unraveling. And that was one of the more unsettling things, is, one of the, actually Andy's doctor, in the book, he commits suicide by sticking his hand in a garbage disposal, because he just kind of goes insane. And so that also was kind of just seeing that play out, and seeing it play out long, of just this mental dysfunction, also was really kind of horrifying, in that he'd cause these echoes to happen to these people, and then how he just kind of had to manipulate, or well, not manipulate, but push everybody as they're trying to escape. And really kind of, both films, there wasn't enough time to do that, so it was just and in the new film, they are not even in like that, because that's the thing, that most of the book, actually, they get captured like midway in the book by the shop agents, and they go to this facility to then just live. And she's living, can't see her dad. And like you said, that's kind of this evil government CIA, like, we've kidnapped an 8-year-old girl. She can't see her family. No lawyers or hearings. It's just, you're here. We got you. We kidnapped you. In the new movie, that does not happen at all.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah. She just, they get her dad and take her somewhere, and she just goes and burns the place up. But there was no like, hey, you're here and we're going to test you. So that was kind of disappointing as well, because that's a big part of the story, is just her kind of
the whole psychological drama.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's where the, manipulation from John Rainbird really happens, is he, becomes her friend, and, really messes with her as well. So,
yeah. It's funny with Rainbird, we were both, self-disclosure, we were both CPS workers, Child Protective Service workers at one time, and we would investigate people who would groom little girls to do what they want, usually sexually. So the whole time I'm reading that, I was like, having flashbacks of the old
Yeah.
job. It's like, no, this he's a pervert. Get him.
Yeah.
And like you said, he did fall in love with her on some level. That was weird. But
Well, and then if we want to, go true spoiler, I mean,
mm-hmm.
the end of the new movie, she leaves with him.
Oh.
He stays alive. She stays alive.
Wow.
And she's like, "Oh, we are connected," and off they go. Now, again, in that new movie, it's not as creepy because, and I don't know if in the first hour it alludes to this, but he also kind of was part of these experiments, or he had some, and that's different from the book. And so she was kind of felt some connection to him. But yeah, they go off in the sunset, if you will. And so then I was like, "Oh, geez." So,
that's bad.
But yeah, so it's just how that went. So
okay. Well, now I'm curious to see that first movie. I think I'll watch it if it's on Netflix. I don't know. How did you watch it? Do you own it?
It's on Peacock as well.
Okay.
Peacock's got the whole trilogy, the original, the sequel, if you will, and then the new one. So
okay, I have to check that out. Cool. So as far as the book goes, the book's always better. It seems like I've seen very few movies where the movie is on par, equal, or better than the book, and this isn't one of them. So the story, it does start out with Andy and Charlie on the run in New York, and then we kind of, through flashbacks, we get how Andy met Charlie's mom and how they did the experimentation with Lot 6 at the college they were at and got injected, and they had this really surreal experience. It sounds like they both had different experiences, but they were both ended up having psychic powers on some level at the end of it. And that changed their lives. They continued to connect. They got married, had Charlie. So she's the only out of how many kids were chosen for the experiments? Like 12?
It was double digits. It was like 12 or something. And then, a handful even had died almost in the experiment, it kind of seemed like. And so there was like 4 left, if I can remember correctly, or a small number that were left. Charlie and his wife, and then a handful of others. And then again, or Andy and his wife. And then Charlie was the only offspring from the project.
Yeah. So with her being the offspring, the shop, which is the government agency, was really interested in her and what her capabilities are. So they tapped their phones and monitored the family, and eventually found out that she could do pyrokinesis. Is that the word?
Yep.
Yeah. So they really wanted to get her, and that's what starts the whole chase. The mom is killed during at some point, trying to torture her, because Charlie had left the home to a friend's house, so they were torturing the mother to find out where she was, and she ended up dying. And then the dad rescues her from the agents after she had been taken, and then they're on the run ever since for like a year and a half, I think is what, like when the story starts, it'd been like a year and a half. So
yeah, a significant time. Yep.
Yeah. So most of the story is them being chased, and then they get captured and taken to the shop's headquarters to be studied and observed and all that stuff. So that's the latter half of the book.
Yeah.
So the chase scene was pretty cool. That's when we get to know the characters, Andy and Charlie, their history, their backstory. We also get to know Rainbird during this part of the story a little bit. And then the shop, their agents and stuff like that. We get to know them as well. So it's a lot of introductories and things like flashbacks and all that stuff. As far as, do you like flashbacks in your stories, in your novels?
I don't mind it, and especially with this one, because it's, it starts out from page 1 just kind of running, and so then you get a little invested in, into this, what's going on, and then, I think in this one they were very well placed. You got to see Andy and Charlie, and then you're like, oh wait, there's there's a wife somewhere. Where is she? You know, and he
Yeah.
kind of did a really good job of pacing the story to the flashbacks to make it kind of, you know, make the flashbacks have significance to the story. Like one of the better flashbacks, I think, is just them growing up with a child with pyrokinesis. You know, the main doctor that was in charge of it, Dr. Wanless, was, you know, kind of explaining like, man, how scary must that have been for them? Like, you know, the baby just lights the crib on fire when she's mad and burns. You know, there was a big, you know, significant incident where she burned her mom because she was mad. Like, and that really led to her, you know, it was just beaten into her. You cannot do this. Like, do not do this. And so that was really her mental struggle. And especially when she got captured and everyone's telling her to do it. And she's like, no, this is bad. That's one of the actual things in the original movie I did not like, is he was trying to teach her to hone it in and in the, you know, and to use it and to control it. And in the book, he was just like, this is the worst thing in the world. Like, you cannot light fires. And so that was a real struggle for her when she needed to light fires to escape on the run and, you know, things like that. So that was a big dilemma. And so those flashbacks helped kind of really cement that dilemma into her. So
Yeah, I agree. It was good. It was good storytelling. That way you didn't have to like have this whole scene, you know, and then jump forward in time and then have another scene and jump forward in time. You know, it was very fluid and interesting. So
Yep.
Well, they're on the run. There's one thing I was reading, and I think you already addressed it, but I want to bring it up. They're hitchhiking. They're being chased after the airport, I think. They fall down this hill and they get picked up by this guy in a van, and has like this one of those old vans that has a painting on the side of the van, like this fantasy scene. That's what I remember. And he picks them up and takes them to their next town or something. And I was wondering, I got the sense that this guy shows up later because he was, I don't know, he seemed like he knew a lot of stuff, and
I don't think we ever hear from him again.
Okay.
Again, they, you know, they just, you know, because that's when then they go kind of to the, you know, stay at the hotel. Well, you know, right after the airport, you know, and this gets kind of blurred in with, you know, again, when we're watching two movies and a book, and, you know, it all kind of meshes together. But like, you know, he uses his abilities, pays the taxi driver $1 to take him, you know, way out of the way, and he tricks him in that it's a $500. And but yeah, that guy with the van we don't see,
like in another book or anything.
Not in another book or you know, or anything like that. So there's nothing at least from what I've read that there's any significance there. So
okay, seemed like Stephen King was trying to give you a wink and a nod, like,
yeah,
remember this guy? He was also in this book, and you know, kind of that's the feel I got from it.
Maybe there was that intention, but I
have
yet to come across it. So
okay, darn it, I thought I'd come upon a spoiler or a Easter egg or something.
Now, do you remember did he ever say his name?
I think so. I don't remember though.
I was gonna say maybe if I knew the name, but yeah, this in this universe book, it's kind of got the tie-ins, and there isn't any real character tie-ins. It's just except for the shop later appears in another book, but
okay,
so
cool. All right, so yeah, they're hitchhiking. They're staying in hotels. They're paying for everything with cash to try not get tracked. They eventually find their way to a farm. They get picked up by a hitchhiker, and he takes them home, and they live on a farm. And him and his wife take care of Charlie and Andy for a bit, give them some food. And in the movie, this was weird, at least in the new one, where the wife is like on life support in this back room. And I was like, this is not the movie. I don't even understand. Why does she have to be on life support? Like, what purpose does that serve? So that was silly.
That was one of the most disappointing parts of the movie for me, because Irv Manders, the farmer, I mean, he is one of the most selfless characters, if you will, because he picks these people up, and then he kind of, from the get-go, thinks something's off, with them. And then as he gets the story out from Andy, like, hey, these government agents are after me and this and that, like, and he's stuck up for him the whole time, like, knowing what had happened. And even after, because, you don't get this sense from the movie, but, like, Charlie basically burns his house to the ground in the battle that ensues here. And he is very understanding, and, hey, these government people were in the wrong, and where the Irv Manders in the new movie was kind of not great, very and selfish. He wanted the money to take him from the hitchhike. They kind of meshed the taxi driver and the turning the $1 into $100. They kind of gave that to him, and so it made him seem not so selfless as this farmer who's just like, I'm going to take you in and help you and feed you, and and then it later turns significant because in the book, that's where she goes back to, because that's all then she knows. They've made such an impression on her. That's who she goes to. So.
Yeah, he was the nicest person she had met recently, and the one that she felt she could trusted. So when she escaped the shop, she made her way back there to be with them. So yeah, I agree. That was disappointing, the way they wrote that character for the movie. Mm-hmm. That's probably when I lost interest at that point. Like, I was still holding out, but yeah.
And there wasn't really any of the shop. And, if you remember reading from the book, the shop knew something, but they didn't really know what the extent of her powers. Like, Dr. Wanless was trying to tell people, like, hey, she's got these powers, and they all kind of were just like, come on in. And, from the book, when she just starts burning the cars and the people and everything, and one of the main, like, agents that was after her, he was just like, nope, I'm out. Yeah. Like, I'm taking off. Rainbird wasn't even really there. That's just kind of when Rainbird was like, hey, I will handle this. We're going to have to find another way to get her. We can't take her by force. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of the first time they really knew what she could do. And again, in the movie, it's just the police show up, Rainbird kills all the police people, and she runs away. And so it was just, again, very, that the Manders farm scene is on my top list of favorite scenes of just what happens. And that's just, kind of not there in any of the, in the movie, in the original movie, it's there, but not in this new one. So,
yeah, that was a pretty intense scene there when she attacks everybody and they're able to escape. And so after escaping the farm, they're able to take Irv's Jeep that he lends them, and they go to Andy's grandpa's cabin out in the middle of Virginia somewhere. So they hide out there, and they think they're alone. It's close to the winter, so they get there, and then it starts snowing, and they end up wintering there. But he goes into town and buys supplies and stuff, and he thinks they're out there alone, but the shop knows. They've known pretty much since the beginning that's where they were. But they let them lie low, so there's no further damage, and they try to regroup and figure out what to do next. This is the part where we see the computer. Like, you can tell it was written back in the 80s, because they're just like, oh, enter in this numbers or this data, and it tells us what to do. What do you think about the using the computer to figure out what's going on?
Especially in the end, when because Rainbird then in the end is figuring out all these, like, probabilities and, like, stuff like that, and it's one of those it's that computer of the times. We actually just watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and he's punching in this thing to the computer, talking to it, and it's just, that's how the computers of the 80s were, I guess. So, and they compiled this database. Hey, what's the probability? Where's he gonna go? And it's like, 96% chance he's going to this
Yeah.
specific place. So yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, so they let him lay low, and then they move in and they capture both of them there as they're trying to leave as the spring comes. They take him back to the shop, and I was really looking forward to seeing the shop as I saw that the story was going that way. It's like, oh, this will be good. But it's like basically like this farm in southern United States somewhere.
Yeah, just these like nice colonial houses, and um yeah, very different from, and even in the original movie it alludes to it, but it wasn't like a prison.
Yeah.
It was just a house basically house with no doors. You couldn't get, couldn't leave. But yeah, it was just a nice farmhouse, had horses and green yards and stuff like that. So
yeah, but there's deep underground levels with.
Yep.
I don't think they were cells, but they were. Or was it like a basement? I got the impression it was like 5-6 levels down, and then there was. Like
yeah, they had their testing. Their testing areas for, especially for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where they would do that. So.
Okay. Yeah, so the dad, Andy, and Charlie lived down there for like 6 months, 9 months.
Oh yeah, long time.
Mm-hmm. And the whole time, this is when we saw Rainbird kind of try to win her over, which he does, and just try to get in on her good side. But the dad, he kept having these premonitions throughout the story, and he gets one here that Charlie's in danger, and so he starts to figure out, okay, I gotta do something different. Were those premonitions part of the side effects of the experience?
Yeah. Yep. He kind of had these premonitions, and this is where I liked again the more mental thing of him just starting to lay the groundwork that he had nothing left in the tank, because they knew that he could, control minds. Another ridiculous thing from the new movie in the farm is I'm talking about the mind control, how they have the special contact lenses because he needs to see their eyes, and nope, we got you figured out. Like, that was ridiculous as well. But, he starts laying the groundwork that hey, I don't have anything left. I can't use my push. So then he can start just slowly pushing people without them really realizing that that's what he was doing. So seeing that playing out, and then seeing, the Charlie and Rainbird, and you're kind of on a time clock because Rainbird's getting to Charlie while her dad is trying to get them out, and it's kind of counting against each other, was really, really interesting. So
yeah, that was some good drama there.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen? Is he going to figure it out? Is he going to get out?
And then as Rainbird starts figuring out, because that's when then Rainbird starts figuring out, okay, the doctor, I'm trying to remember the name of his doctor, but I'm not seeing it here. But all of a sudden he starts doing weird things and talking about, stuff he never has talked about. And so all of a sudden Rainbird starts, because again, he's kind of the mastermind of everything, and he's just kind of putting the pieces together. So then he goes to the computer and is like, hey, has the doctor been pushed by Andy? And it's like, yeah, probably. And that's when he's like, okay, this is coming to a head. But all of that drama was pretty intense, seeing how it was going to play out. So
yeah, that was good. And then you mentioned earlier with the one doctor, he commits suicide by sticking his arm down the garbage disposal. That once he kind of mentioned, he had said a statement, and then Andy pushed him, and then he started talking about echoes and people can do weird things. I was like, uh-oh, something's gonna happen with the garbage disposal.
Yeah. Yep.
And then there's a short scene where the doctor's not feeling well, and he kind of looks down in the garbage disposal and sees it, and then he leaves. And I was like, oh, foreshadowing right there. Something's happening. And
just that inner, turmoil from these people that, and it kind of alluded to Andy, because that's what he did for his job, was push people for good, to, lose weight or be more proactive at work and, be able to get promotions and more confidence. And with those echoes, if they were to happen, he was kind of present. So then he could kind of rein the echoes in and fix them. So he never had any.
Course correct them.
Yeah. But, once the doctor started echoing and Andy was away from him, like there was no turning back. So you got to kind of see how damaging, and then wonder if there's maybe people that he had pushed that, in the cab driver, maybe who knows what happened to him, or the, motel worker. Like there's a bunch of people you're like, I wonder how many people have maybe died in his wake that he doesn't know about or realize. So, but yeah.
And then he pushes Cap, the captain of the shop, and he goes off the deep end thinking about snakes and golfing and slicing. You see snakes everywhere. And that's when, like you said, Rainbird figures it out. He's like, okay, something's going on here. So that was pretty interesting there. And then the end part is the dad's going to break her out, and they're going to meet at the horse stables. But due to Rainbird figuring it out, he meets Charlie there first. And then when Andy and Cap show up, there's this big showdown, and Charlie just unleashes, because I think that's when her dad gets shot and he dies. And so Charlie just unleashes everything. Burns down the stables, burns down the farm, the shop, all the buildings, just goes crazy, and everybody's running for their lives. That was pretty horror based, I guess you could say, how that stuff going on.
And and this will be the first time I allude to it, but a lot of the similarities with Carrie, and while Carrie didn't have pyrokinesis, her telekinesis caused fires. She, basically burned down her whole town, in that book. And so, just seeing that destruction from Charlie and Firestarter was, a good king, I liked seeing that, and just also the people just, he's very descriptive, and, people were getting electrocuted, and just, all the kind of innocent people that worked there and maybe even didn't have a clue what the shop really was. And now this person's shooting fire, and everyone's just running for their lives, and
very chaotic.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's when she's able to escape. Rainbird is killed, her dad's killed, the Cap's killed. A lot of the characters we had met previously throughout the story are killed. But she escapes, and like we said earlier, she makes it back to that farm with Irv, and she stays there for a bit. Then she comes up with a plan, because the shop's someone's still tracking her, right? And they find out she goes back there.
Yeah, someone's still tracking her, and I mean, I think, she killed the physical shop, but there were still remnants of, what hasn't been totally destroyed. I mean, it's still somewhat existing. So,
so they track her down to the farm, but she had already left. And the end result is she goes to Rolling Stone and talks to them and discloses and tells her story to them, because they're not connected to a government agency. They're kind of a freelance magazine or agency at that point. And so she tells them everything. I'm assuming it got published, because we didn't. That's where the story ends.
Never know.
One question I had is, throughout the story, Andy talks to this guy on the phone. I think his name's Quincy.
Yep.
Do you know anything about what his deal is? I didn't pick that up.
I want to say, because I think they knew each other in college. He was kind of the one, and whether he was more sinister, we'll never know, but he was the one that kind of, told Andy, hey, about the whole Lot 6 program, like make a quick $200, and
he was that first
he's
guy.
He's kind of that guy that was like, hey, you can do this thing, get some money, and then he kind of confided in him, whether that was like a, kind of a agent in place, maybe speculation, but that was just kind of his person he could talk about, because Andy kept everything they tried to keep it all hidden from everybody, except for this person that he would talk to and get guidance from and stuff like that. So yeah, it's never been, said or anything of who he is or anything like that. But
just a guy he met along the way.
Yeah. And yep.
His college buddies.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. So that's the basics of the story. The big thing I was wondering throughout is the push that was caused by Lot 6. Do we ever see that pop up in another Stephen King book, story, movie?
No, not in that sense. I mean, one of the things Stephen King's always said, and whether he'll do it or not, he said, I've always wanted to know what happens with Charlie, and if she would run into Danny Torrance from The Shining. Mm-hmm. Now he since has written Dr. Sleep, which we get to see Danny Torrance as an adult, but he's always kind of wanted the two of them to connect and see how that would go. So you have the Shine, that kind of ability, but we haven't really seen the mind control push again. And I mean, maybe I'm missing something as well. I tend to, this is why I like reading them again and again, is, I kind of lose my crispness on, everything, but I haven't recalled another push like this, where it was ooh, the shop now knowing, hey, we got somebody else and something to look into. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting, because that's where my mind went, was The Shine. It's well, The Shine shows up in other books, right?
Yeah.
In some form. So well, does the push show up? Is that another ability that he writes about later? But it doesn't sound like it. But.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of that type of control. So
cool. All right. Well, so as far as Firestarter goes, how would you? I'll give a rating to this book based on my, very little Stephen King experience and just in general. I would say the book is probably an 8, 7.8. High 7s, 8. Very entertaining. Little dated, but that's not his fault. That's not the story's fault. But as far as character development, great story, great stuff. I enjoyed reading it. I'd read it again at some point in the future. So for you, Jordan, as far as overall Stephen King novels, where does this rate for him?
Overall for me, I mean, now if I'm just going to rate it, that was the first number that popped into my head was 8. Mm-hmm. If I'm just rating as an individual book, overall, it's got to fall somewhere in the middle. I've definitely read worse, and I've definitely read a lot better. Mm-hmm. But I kind of struggle. I have always struggled ranking things I love against each other, right? Because it's I like it. I really enjoy it. I don't want to put it way at the bottom or say, but the general consensus is it's just kind of a middle work. But yeah, I really did like it. And, maybe again, the social worker in me, I really connected, not in a, I connected with Rainbird more, I think, knowing just how truly sinister that is, of just kind of messing with, and in this case too, a little girl, of just, you could just see the groundwork of, okay, let me first go in and do this and just piece by piece chip away. And you're seeing these things happen in real life, I'm always red flag. And, so I just kind of wanted to yell at Charlie and red flag here.
Get out of there.
So for maybe a lot of people, Rainbird is not that sinister of a person. They don't have that connection of, how messed up that really is on a, personal level that I've seen. And so that, for me, that he was one of my, I was thinking, I'm he's one of my all-time top, bad guys. And the first time I read it, probably didn't feel that way because I didn't have any kids. And that was the other thing. I've got a daughter that is, a year younger than Charlie right now. So for this and the whole, them going after her and just,
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the beginning, she's tired, she's hungry. It's like 2 a.m. and they're just being dragged through airports and motels. It's like, I really did feel that like anger that Andy had of the shop of like, and she just wants to go to school and be normal. And so for me too, with a daughter that age, it was, the sinisterness, it really got to me too. So yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, that's some good points. So you're saying out of all the Stephen King books, it's kind of middle of the road?
I put a middle of the road. So
okay, so we're gonna read some good books then. It sounds
yeah,
like. If
yeah,
comparison to other novels, that's an 8, but Stephen King, it's middle of the road. So
yeah, he's got some good ones out there, and I mean, and that's the thing. I like them all. I don't ever read one and be like, well, this was awful. So, can't say the same for the movies. I'll say that with movies. Yeah, the new Firestarter for me was awful, and again, not in the sense that just it didn't follow, because there's some of my favorite Stephen King books are completely different from the movie, and I still like them both because I can do that. But yeah, I just did not enjoy this movie very much. So
yeah, I agree. All right, cool. So what are we reading next? What are we going to review next?
Well, I mean, if we want to just go and and jump the gun, we've got. I'll take a quick look at my.
Got the whole bookcase right there. You have every Stephen King novel, right?
Yes, yeah. Everything everything that if it's available in a reasonable price point, then I got it. So, and including some hard to finds, as now my wife is telling me sell some of this stuff that I bought 20 years ago, and honestly I've never opened really. It's just that's kind of my fandom, is to get these things, and now all of a sudden because with Stephen King, he had his heyday, and he's still known as that author, right? New Stephen King book comes out, people kind of know about it, but I would say not as much as probably when he was writing Firestarter and Cujo and It. Like that was when he was
80s and 90s
in his prime, But then all of a sudden, so when I got into Stephen King, really got into him, he wasn't not a lot of people were just like screaming for the new Stephen King book. You could get it pretty easily. But then all of a sudden, with I don't know what's happened, but the Stephen King universe is taking off with, It remakes, Pet Sematary, Castle Rock on Hulu. Like it's just they're just pumping into this stuff, and so all of a sudden it's taking off. So now all these people want all these books that are written 20 years ago that are just hard, like special edition stuff. So yeah. But anyways, back to Cujo is next as I look at the shelf. But Cujo would be the next book. Unfortunately, not a new movie. I'm still waiting on that. And I guess I don't know. We could go, backwards through like movie chronology if we wanted to do that, or we just go chronological through that. And again, this was a perfect spot for me. I can. We missed out on some of the older stuff, but we can kind of review those quick. You did have a new, we're going to have a new Salem's Lot.
Oh, really?
And actually, this will be the first Salem's Lot movie made, because there's 2 movies made, but they're both made for TV. Not an actual cinematic release of Salem's Lot has ever been made. So yeah, kind of however we want to, hit it. We can. Cujo's the next book
on the list.
On the list, yeah, that would be up next. So, in terms of novel, because I don't know, I need to look at the list, but there's a nonfiction book, and I might have put that in the chronological list because it's just listed on there. But obviously, there won't be a movie with with that unless it's a documentary. But yeah, Cujo's up. So for book wise, so kind of want to tap.
Sorry. Any idea on the Salem's Lot where that's in production? Are they filming it?
I want to say it's even done filming. I think it's coming out here in the fall.
Okay.
So they just had a really good And we could always talk about this more. They just had a really good, it's based on a short story with Adrian Brody called Chapelwaite.
Mm-hmm.
And not a lot of people would catch that that's anything Stephen King related because there is no short story called Chapelwaite. It's based on a book called Jerusalem's Lot, but they wanted to not get confused with the new Salem's Lot movie, and so they called it after the town that it took place in, and it takes place in the 1800s, and it's very well done. It was on Epix.
Yeah,
but
seen something about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we also talked about the Gwendy series next.
Yeah. Yeah, and I still have yet to read the third one, just in getting sidetracked with. I read this one really quick to get ready for the new movie, and then obviously just reading other things on the bookshelf here and stuff like that. So I still have yet to finish the Gwendy series. So
well, the third book just came out, right?
Yeah, it came out. I want to say a couple months ago. So, Yep, and then So,
all right.
Yep.
Let's do those top books, those early books first.
Okay.
So we can do Cujo, and then we'll jump back and maybe start with Carrie. I would say Carrie now, but it sounds like it's very similar to Firestarter.
Yeah, the good thing with Carrie is, very quick. I always kind of recommend that to people. It's probably one of his quickest reads out there. But yeah, Cujo would be a good one to just go, and then we can start at the beginning and work our way through. So
okay, sounds good. So we'll do that, and we'll get back, jump on the mics again, and do a review of that at some point in the near future, probably next month, sometime in June. So stay tuned for the next podcast in our Stephen King series. I want to thank you, Jordan, for joining me
Thanks for having
on this review. It's good to talk to you again and talk Stephen King. So we'll read Cujo, talk about it, and then we'll go from there, I guess. So
all right.
Make sure you like and subscribe to our videos so we get more traffic, more views, all that stuff, that social media helps out with. So definitely subscribe to our channel, like the video, comment, let us know what you think about Firestarter. If you read it, if you saw the movie, which one you like better, all that stuff. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.